It's Monday, March 3rd, 2025. The fallout continues over the Ukraine dust-up, creating a strategic reserve of cryptocurrency. And just what have we learned about Matthew Livelsberger, the Cybertruck bomber, since January? Next on the AM Update.
What if anything? What if a bomb drops on your head right now?
And I think he has made it almost impossible to sell to the American people that he's a good investment.
No one here is claiming Vladimir Putin is going to get the Nobel Peace Prize this year, or that he should be the Man of the Year of the Humanitarian Association.
That the longer this goes on, not only are more Ukrainians losing their lives, but it increases the potential of this escalation towards World War III.
I think he's probably one of the dumbest, luckiest people to exist on this earth.
I have never seen Donald Trump more irate than he was on Friday afternoon in a setting like that when he met with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky.
Maybe he did. I don't know what happened, but he didn't break it with me. He wants to make a deal. I don't know if you can make a deal. The problem is I've empowered you to be a tough guy. And I don't think you'd be a tough guy without the United States. And your people are very brave. But you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards. But once we sign that deal, you're in a much better position.
That whole thing started as Vladimir Zelensky tried to lecture Vice President J.D. Vance on his view of history regarding the Ukraine-Russia conflict.
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the President for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military?
So regardless of where you fall on the conflict in Ukraine, what just happened there with Volodymyr Zelensky attempting to go into the Oval Office and in front of the American media and international media and try to lecture American leaders on where they are falling short, allegedly, that just cannot happen. I'll have more to say on that on Air Analysis. This is just a picture of how angry Trump got, rightfully so in my estimation, just how angry Trump got. Here is a question from a reporter about hypotheticals.
What if Russia breaks?
She's asking, what if Russia breaks the ceasefire?
Well, what if anything? What if a bomb drops on your head right now? Okay? What if they broke it? I don't know. They broke it with Biden because Biden, they didn't respect him. They didn't respect Obama. They respect me.
Generally, Trump is very measured in these settings, but you can tell that Volodymyr Zelensky absolutely set him off. But as extraordinary as those exchanges were during their meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky, later on in the day, on Friday, hell froze over. Here's Senator Lindsey Graham.
He was shocked. He was very upbeat. I told Zelensky, we'll talk about security guarantees. We'll talk about ceasefires and how the war ends. This is a process. You have a new relationship with America, a $500 billion, $500 billion deal that President Trump is proud of, that gives us an interest worth defending. Let's talk about the positive. But he was terrible at Munich, Zelensky, and I think he has made it almost impossible to sell to the American people that he's a good investment.
If Senator Graham has tapped out on Vladimir Zelensky, that should tell you everything you need to know. The fallout continued over the weekend. Here is Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, on ABC this week.
No one here is claiming Vladimir Putin is going to get the Nobel Peace Prize this year, or that he should be the Man of the Year of the Humanitarian Association. What we're arguing here is he has a very large country. They're in full war footing. They're cranking out weapons now at a war footing pace, and we need to figure out, is there a way to get them to stop the war? And the only way you're going to do that is to get Russians engaged in negotiations, something the Europeans haven't been able to do, the Biden administration wasn't able to do or didn't even try. That's the goal here. It's that simple. Can we try to sit with them and figure out whether there's anything, what are the Russians' demands, under what conditions would the Russians be willing to stop this war? And as I said, we don't know what those are because we haven't talked to them in 3 years. That's the singular goal here, is to try to bring about an end to this conflict, and it begins by getting them to the table. Ultimately, like any truce, like any peace agreement anywhere in the world, those things will have to be enforced, they'll have to be enduring, there'll have to be safeguards put in place. Everybody understands that, but it begins with the first step, and that is engaging them to see if it's even possible. Because if it's not possible, then what we're looking at is a protracted stalemate with thousands of people dying, billions of dollars pouring in, and more death and destruction.
Also on Sunday, there was a spontaneous, let's call it that, a spontaneous meeting with European leaders and Volodymyr Zelensky. The outcome of that meeting, here's UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer.
First, we will keep the military aid flowing. Second, we agreed that any lasting peace must ensure Ukraine's sovereignty and security. Third, in the event of a peace deal, we will keep boosting Ukraine's own defensive capabilities. Fourth, we will go further to develop a coalition of the willing to defend a deal in Ukraine. The UK is prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air, together with others. Europe must do the heavy lifting.
British Premier Keir Starmer announcing a $2 billion deal in the aftermath of their emergency meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky. $2 billion to fund air defense missiles for Ukraine. So let's just take a step back here real quick. Am I getting this right? So the immediate message from the American left right after the Trump-Zelensky meeting was that Trump and Vance planned to gang up and bully Zelensky. Again, that was the message ubiquitously amongst the American left, total spontaneous messaging unity. Then after the meeting on Friday evening, Eurotrash leaders posted oodles of copy and pasted messages of support for Zelensky. Again, totally spontaneous messaging unity. And then on Sunday, a totally unplanned, spontaneous emergency meeting with EU leaders who cozy up further to Z. And all of a sudden, we've got billions of dollars of support for Ukraine. Again, totally spontaneous. Come on, man. According to the left, the only thing that was not spontaneous here, the only thing that was planned this weekend when it comes to the Ukraine conflict, the only thing that was planned was Trump and Vance ganging up. And the outcome of all of this is the actual fulfillment, or a version of fulfillment, of Donald Trump's foreign policy related to Europe that he's been talking about for a decade, which is that NATO countries need to actually fund themselves. The American economy just cannot sustain this. Can't just pay and underwrite all of this for NATO. And this is all supposedly some egg-in-the-face moment for Donald Trump, according to our beloved media. Come on. Hundreds of protesters gathered in Vermont Saturday to protest Vice President J.D. Vance's visit to a local ski resort less than 24 hours after his exchange with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Vance, who brought his family to a Sugarbush Resort in Warren, Vermont, was greeted by a half-mile gauntlet of protesters holding pro-Ukraine signs. There appeared to be hundreds in the crowd. Why are they in Vermont? Why are these? I mean, you realize that Vermont is not Ukraine, correct? Just from a big picture point of view, with the reaction to what happened over the weekend, obviously this was the dominant story, but the reaction to what happened, from a big picture view, go back and tell yourself 20 years ago, that just saying give peace a chance would be coded now as right-wing, because that's everything that I saw. If you were right-wing, you loved what you saw from Trump and Vance the other day. If you're left-wing, you absolutely hated it and you want this war to continue, ostensibly, into perpetuity. It's just wild times in which we're living. In other news, President Trump has signed an executive order making English the official language of the United States. The order revokes the executive order issued by former President Bill Clinton in 2000, improving access services for persons with limited English proficiency. That executive order required federal agencies and recipients of federal funding to provide language assistance to non-English speakers. However, Trump's order notes it will not require or direct any changes in services provided by any agency. It'll be up to agency heads to decide if changes should be made. Also, over the weekend, President Trump announced the names of 3 cryptocurrencies to be included in a new U.S. crypto strategic reserve, spiking the value of each in market trading. Trump said on social media that his January executive order on digital assets would create a stockpile of currencies, including Ripple, Solana, and Cardano. The assets rose 10 to 35% in trading on Sunday. Other digital assets also gained. Trump said his order directed the presidential working group to move forward on a crypto strategic reserve that includes the aforementioned cryptocurrencies. It'll make sure the U.S. is the crypto capital of the world. All right, quickly before our first break, try not to react to every single dumb thing that the left says, but this took the cake the other day. Here is Congresswoman Ilhan Omar of the great state of Somalia lecturing a host on Sirius XM about how dumb Elon Musk is.
He literally posted on X, there's a shortage of top-notch air traffic controllers. If you have retired but are open to returning to work, please consider doing so. How about you don't fire as many as you did? So you've got...
The retirement thing for air traffic controllers is also, again, it just shows how much he doesn't know. I know people talk about him as a genius, but to me, I think he's probably one of the dumbest, luckiest people to exist on this earth.
That's Congresswoman Ilhan Omar of the great state of Somalia. I believe that's somewhere between North Dakota and Wisconsin. For you geography nerds, I would like to submit something very simply this morning. Okay. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar of the state of Somalia, who allegedly married her brother, maybe in between about 25 ums and ahs, you probably should not be commenting on the intelligence of Elon Musk. Just throwing that out there. When we come back, an update on Pope Francis's health, another day that ends in Y, another emergency landing over American airspace, and what, if anything, have we learned about the Cybertruck New Year's Day bomber? All of that coming up next. Video captured a FedEx Boeing aircraft returning to Newark Airport for an emergency landing after its right engine caught on fire. Dramatic video shows the plane banking right when it's letting off a large plume of smoke as fire appears from its engine. Eyewitnesses said they heard a loud explosion too, while another can be heard in one video frantically yelling, "Oh my God." In another video, the FedEx cargo plane can be seen landing safely while its engine is still in flames. There were no reported injuries, and the plane touched down at 8:07 a.m. on Saturday morning. It's unclear how many people were on board at the time. Air traffic was briefly halted as a precaution at the airport at Newark, but operations, of course, resumed quickly. Pope Francis gave his Sunday blessing in written form as he remains in the hospital, where the Vatican earlier confirmed he's still resting following a peaceful night as he continues his recovery from double pneumonia. Francis addressed the faithful in the blessing, writing, quote, "I am still sending you these thoughts from the hospital, where he's been receiving treatment since February 14th after a bout of bronchitis worsened and turned into a complex pneumonia in both lungs." He said in his address, quote, "I feel in my heart the blessing that is hidden within frailty, because it is precisely in these moments that we learn even more to trust in the Lord." Last week, before that blow-up with Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky, Vice President J.D. Vance, a Catholic, gave these thoughts at the National Catholic Prayer Breakfast.
So I would ask all of us if you would join me in this prayer for Pope Francis. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Almighty and generous God, we thank you for your charity. Please grant your mercy upon Pope Francis so he may be restored from sickness and guide us in watchful care. We pray that you bless our Holy Father's doctors, nurses, and medical staff with wisdom and capability so that you may work through them to renew the health of your shepherd through Christ our Lord. Amen.
So what exactly has happened with the Matthew Leivelsberger story? I was asked a question a couple of weeks ago on Ask or Tell Me Anything, and I said, you know what, maybe we'll look into the Matthew Leivelsberger story again. So I did over the weekend, and here's what I found. Jack squat. Now, of course, that's from an official standpoint. That's not too much of a surprise. The only thing that I've seen recently is actually this from the Las Vegas Review-Journal. It's a piece written by Arthur Kane. He's the editor of the investigations department at the Las Vegas Journal-Review. And he had this piece headlined, "What Are They Hiding? Metro Withholds Manifesto of Cybertruck Bomber." The Metropolitan Police Department punted to the federal government when it came to releasing the manifesto written by Cybertruck bomber Matthew Leibelsberger, claiming a number of exemptions, but also that federal officials say it contains classified information. The denial raises questions about what in the manifesto is a secret, especially when Leibelsberger alleged that he participated in war crimes during his service in Afghanistan. Henry Sokolsky, the executive director of the Non-Proliferation Policy Education Center, a think tank that deals with weapons proliferation, also has written about the government's tendency to overclassify documents when no sensitive information is involved. Sokolsky said the classification process and any reviews are so flawed that often bureaucrats are classifying documents just to have more control in their offices or protect their jobs. He added that a bill was introduced last year to define what should be classified, but it hasn't passed. Before Leibelsberger died in the bombing January 1st, he sent an email to retired U.S. Army intelligence officer Sam Shoemate, alleging that Leibelsberger was part of a cover-up of war crimes. Leibelsberger blew up a Tesla Cybertruck that he had rented and filled with makeshift explosives, killing himself and injuring 7 other people in front of the Trump Tower in Las Vegas. He told friends he'd suffered from PTSD, depression, and brain injuries from his service as a decorated Green Beret operations sergeant. When the Review-Journal requested a copy of Leibelsberger's manifesto that investigators said they found on his phone, Metro Police initially responded that it isn't the custodian of the record and that evidence isn't a public record. When pressed, an unidentified Metro Public Information Officer emailed to say federal partners have the document and that they say it's classified. Previously, Metro officials also wrote that the manifesto does not record any public business and thus is not a public record. Instead, it is evidence collected by law enforcement pursuant to an investigation. So this is all we have. In the intervening time between basically January 15th is when this story really died down, and now, and it's absolutely jack squat. Credit to Arthur Kane at the Las Vegas Review-Journal for even writing this story recently. The only news that we have is that there's no news, and that federal officials basically came in, swooped in, took the investigation over from local police there in Las Vegas, and are doing their own investigation. So, I'm sorry, but goodness gracious, I understand why this story, for a number of reasons, got out of the limelight. We had this little thing called the inauguration in the first 6 weeks of the Trump administration. I think what makes this story particularly odd is that because of the Shoemate revelations on Sean Ryan's program, we had oodles of details that on cases like this we might have not been privy to right from the outset. And then nothing. Zilch. Ever since. It's kind of going in the same file as another Las Vegas incident. Stephen Paddock, the Las Vegas shooter. We still don't have any good answers for what happened there. Seems like this story is going the exact same direction. And now here's this. Elon Musk joined Joe Rogan once again. Went in depth on why exactly he went all in on Donald Trump.
The reason I went so hardcore for Trump was because, to me, this was a fork in the road, a very obvious fork in the road. If they had another 4 years, they would legalize enough illegals in the swing states to make the swing states not swing states. They would be blue states. Then they would win the presidential. They'd win the House, the Senate, and the presidency. They would then make D.C. into a state, maybe Puerto Rico, get 4 extra senators, pack the Supreme Court. So then you'll have the House, Judiciary, Senate, and presidency, all blue. And then they will keep importing more illegals to cement that outcome. Basically what happened in California. Jesus Christ. It would have been the end. That's why I went so hardcore for Trump. It was otherwise been the end, and that's why the Democrat machine is so intent on destroying me.
It's just so fascinating that people can't see this.
I mean, I invite people to do their research. The more they do their research, the more they will see that what I'm saying is absolutely true.
Elon Musk, latest appearance on Joe Rogan's. Why did I play that clip this morning? because I think it is a very, very necessary reminder. With very limited exception, really one major exception, and that was the Epstein, whatever the heck that was, files, binders full of nothing from last week, with that being pretty much the only major exception. It's easy to get caught up in the euphoria of the first 6 weeks of the Trump administration and forget how perilously close America was from going off the cliff. Elon Musk hasn't forgotten, and I think we do well to do the same. Good for Elon Musk as well. I'm glad somebody with a position of power and influence like he hasn't forgotten these very important things. That we were this close from going off the edge. When we come back, we'll discuss Vladimir Zelensky going off the edge. That's next. And finally, air analysis, slightly acidic, mostly necessary. Going back to the Zelensky story that we led off today's show with, I just think this needs to be said. No matter where you fall on the Ukraine-Russia conflict, whether you just hate Ukrainians and want to get out of there or something, whatever, and I'm just exaggerating, or whether you have a Ukrainian flag in your bio and are willing to go die for Vlad, wherever you fall on that spectrum, it just blows my mind that people think Zelensky was a victim in any way after that exchange on Friday. I don't care how righteous Z's convictions were, whether he felt like he wasn't getting his points across or was being ignored. You just do not walk into the Oval Office and even come up to the line, toe the line of disrespect, much less fully cross over it. In every man's life, particularly young men, but there comes a time when your father, a father figure, a mentor has to tell you, you simply cannot behave this way. Toddlers get this message all the time. Tell Ben all the time, it's okay to be sad or upset, but we don't scream and cry. You cannot behave that way. But there comes a time in every man's life when he's old enough to know better, when we still need to be reminded about the order of things. Sometimes this happens at 8 years old, 11 years old, 15 years old, sometimes into your 20s. Accountability is a just but sometimes cruel female dog. Nevertheless, as a grown man, there are lines you just cannot cross and still expect a relationship or your reputation to be undamaged. You cannot mouth off or show disrespect to someone in authority over you, no matter how unfair they are, and expect there to be zero consequences. And it doesn't matter whether the person in authority over you is in the right or you are. I had to learn a similar lesson the hard way once, very early in my career. When my boss at the time, this was well before my current boss, by the way, when my boss at the time went postal on me for towing the aforementioned line of disrespect. Fortunately, this guy was a good man and we were able to reconcile. And unlike the current example, at that job, there weren't hundreds of thousands of lives on the line. When it comes to hierarchical relationships, sometimes you have to eat a poop sandwich. Sometimes you're just being an ingrate. I happen to think that Zelensky is an ingrate, but in effect, the United States is Ukraine's boss. The United States, Donald Trump, is Zelensky's boss. And you just cannot do and say what Zelensky did on Friday and expect there to be no consequences. I thought this was just basic human psychology that a head of state would understand, but apparently not. That's going to do it for a Monday. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntyre, and this is the AM Update.